Hey everyone, welcome to UNIQUEWAYS with Thomas Girard, a more than audio podcast. We've got a super awesome guest on the show today here in the podcast recording studio in Vancouver. Her work specializes in creating a captivating look and feel to help organizations stand out and connect with their audiences. Her approach to designing resonant campaigns, identities, and communication materials involves targeted research, collaboration, and problem solving. And she has this book out, co-authored, The Miracle Mindset. Check it out. Please join me in welcoming Flora Gordon. Welcome, Flora.
Thanks so much, Thomas. Lovely to be here. And as the first video guest, am I the first?
You are the first, yeah.
Sweet.
Okay, great. Let's go into the questions. So number one, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
Yeah, so I'm a certified design professional based in Vancouver. I do corporate work and branding work. I think today we might touch a bit more on my work as an educator. So I'm a course author and facilitator at Simon Fraser University in continuing studies in 3 programs.
Great. And just to note for our audience, on the audio recording podcast, we talked a lot about issues and bringing up issues on the show and went into mental health a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, Flora and I have been chatting about how to bring these issues forward and how to, what kind of response we get. You were talking about the kind of response you got after the first podcast went out, right?
Right. I got really amazing responses. I really touched everyone who shot me a message on LinkedIn or text or email or Facebook to say, hey, thanks so much for bringing up these issues. A lot of creative people stuck working from home. Well, I mean, we have been otherwise, but used to working in a group, used to working in a team, being isolated, and we're not always given the opportunity to express what we're dealing with. And I hope that sharing some of my struggles will make some other people feel like they're not alone in that journey.
Great. Okay, let's go into question 2. What's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of this one. In the audio podcast, I talked about being born with a rare neurological disorder that causes anxiety, depression, epilepsy. Also about my intuitive work. Those are 2 really big processes for me. But one thing that's making me different now is being on this sort of both sides of something. So being both on the side of hiring agencies and then also operating as one. That's shown me a lot of interesting business stuff. So when I brought in agencies to pitch and things like that, that's a new opportunity for me that I'm learning a lot. It's really affecting the way that I market myself and present myself.
Yeah, just another note for the audience, the bio that I started with doesn't really do it full justice. You've started this new agency, Homage. You've run your own show for a long time alongside your teaching and the book authoring. I feel like we can't not mention those and have a good episode, right? So yeah, I think you've got so much stuff going on, right?
Yeah, thank you. Definitely, and the mentoring, the sort of teaching others about networking, business development, and that's a big part for me. I want to definitely send the elevator back down.
Right. Question 4 is always a hurdle, and I'm curious to see how it lands in this in-person episode. But the question is, what does your future look like?
Yeah, I would, it's funny because a lot of people have this idea, like you're gonna grow your agency, you're gonna get an office downtown in Vancouver, it might be in East Vancouver, Gastown, things like that. And I have never been really interested in working half the time to pay studio rent. So I am really interested in growing my business, but also trying to make the creatives working with me as comfortable as possible. So I would like to scale and be doing some bigger ad campaigns, working as a ghost designer for agencies, like working on bigger, being sought out, more international projects. But I don't aim to have that much of a physical footprint. I think it can kind of interfere with self-care, sort of like be stuck at the office till 9 p.m. Really trying to avoid that.
We recently had Timothy Goodman on the audio podcast, and he's so on fire right now. He's all over the press, and we were chatting, I follow the mantra of do what you love, or otherwise known as do what you love and the money will follow. And Timothy Goodman made a point of saying how much he hates that phrase, and it was a great kind of point for us, because I think we both respected our own kind of paths, but we realized how different they are. Anyway.
Completely, and I'm thinking a lot about the success of the brands and organizations and campaigns and causes that I work towards. So to me, when clients and organizations and colleagues of mine are extremely successful, and I've helped in some small way, like to me, that's kind of what I'm envisioning. Yeah, that's what I'm excited for.
Okay, number 5, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
Yeah, so last time I talked about feeling out of place, but I can talk about more being based in Vancouver, being based in the traditional unceded territories of Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam nations, having family members who are Indigenous and wanting to learn more about, the history of the places we're from, learning more words to describe, not only having like a Western perspective on how to describe where we're from, and trying to, I've had some workshops on like decolonizing as an educator, things, how to bring that might have not been the exact wording of it, but how to bring in a wider perspective. I've spent most of my time in Vancouver, but I'm still really eager to expand my boundaries and my knowledge.
That's great. The Vancouver aspect of this podcast is a key point, because the podcast recording studio is here in Vancouver, right? But on the audio podcast, we've had a bunch of New York presence recently. Mm-hmm. Timothy Goodman's a great example of that, and his work is entirely devoted to the fact that he's in New York City and he's wanting to support the communities there. And being in Vancouver, we're much more about the global and about reaching people in different places, I think. Mm-hmm. But of course this question has different responses, and some of them are about that physicality of the space, like the Vancouver and the New York, and others are about this kind of more nebulous idea of location. But I think that's a great way to go forward. So number 6 is, if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
Okay, so I think I would say just before starting a business, doing a bit more research about like government and other types of resources that they have. So for instance, there was, I don't know if it's still around, but there's a program that if you get laid off, the YWCA can like sponsor part of, give you these courses and things like that, and give you some bursary money, or there are things like grants and funding and courses and things like that I didn't really take advantage of. I'll give you another example. I've got a really good friend who has some pretty severe health problems, and when he got laid off from his contract, he called his health insurance and he said, can I just keep paying into my plan? It's going to be a bit more per month, but then he didn't have to like reapply with a health questionnaire. And I don't think people are aware of that. Things like those little things to do with business that are going to make like a huge difference. So I really encourage people to find a mentor if they can, because these really small shifts, I don't know if we talked about, get an estimate about your income taxes, like 6 months to going into business. Just pay an accountant for a couple hours of your time, just like make an estimate of your like income, and then also your expenses, and they'll say you're going to be owing this at the end of the year, just like rough estimate, because if you mess up and you don't do that, you can be paying that back for like 3 years.
Great advice.
Yeah.
So now we move into number 7. What's a day in your life like?
Yeah, I would say going to photo shoots, doing lots of self-care, directing the people working for and with me, client liaison and stuff. Like my latest thing that my colleague Rena Little is helping me with is we're getting like administrative support, so we don't have to do the administrative work anymore. We hand that off to someone who's naturally good at that, because I'm not, and just trying to spend more time in what they call zone of genius. less time in the sort of administrative organizational part of the day, and just as much time as I can brainstorming and looking through typefaces.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And lifelong learning is a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
Yeah, so I'm just always trying to take just continuously learning, and it doesn't even always matter what topic it is. It's just like keeping your brain active. So I've been taking French classes. I actually did French immersion. So I'm taking French classes. I'm actually and I give myself these like projects and challenges. So right now my challenge is to make like a really, really, really good French tagline for my business. But I need it to make enough sense. It can't be like so, using such specific French terminology that it would not make sense to someone who's like a beginner in French. So I've been looking at some of the best French taglines and positioning statements, and sort of, just always having a creative challenge, I think, keeps you learning.
I love the kind of Frenchness of image.
Thank you.
It's so fun.
Thank you.
So the next one's about tools, and we often talk about this in terms of the analog and the digital, and I know you do photography, and there is a kind of tactile element even within digital photography because you're operating this device, right? Do you want to talk a bit about the analog and the digital tools?
Yeah, so I need to have a paper and pen, and I briefly mentioned my shower note-taking device, which is actually just like a waterproof pad of paper and pencil. But I always need those tools to be able to draw something, and I actually downloaded some tools on the iPhone where you're supposed to sketch with your finger, and they're pretty terrible so far. Like if someone wants to send me the name of a great one, I'm open to it. But it's sort of like playing Pictionary using your left or your non-dominant hand to draw. So tools, I'm really into making videos, video tutorials, and like PDF checklists and things like that. So I'm trying to create tools to help others either learn or collaborate with me better. And the first time someone sent me a video feedback from a meeting, I thought it was the biggest waste of time. And now look at me, I'm on Loom every day summarizing emails. I think it's really important to figure out the learning style preferences of your clients, your audiences, your students, and cater to that. So if they, if they're like me, they're an auditory learner, if they would like to see instructions step by step, if they need really hands-on tasks, like just determining that and then meeting them in the middle.
Nice, that's great. So the next question, I got called out by a recent guest, Jessica Halfand. The question is about work-life balance, and she asked me how I deal with work-life balance.
Oh yeah.
And I said asymmetry.
I love it.
But the question is, how do you deal with work-life balance?
Yeah, so I used to think that once I would get to a certain point with being organized or having my work organized or things like that, then I could start exercising. Then I could start taking breaks and things like that. And what I had to realize was you actually probably won't get to that point unless you just put the exercise in your calendar, in your routine, find a buddy, because it's sort of like when people perpetually say, when I have enough money someday, or when I have enough energy. And the thing is, self-care, things like that, will make you have more energy. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I was researching similar podcasts and came across the Tim Ferriss podcast with Dr. What's his name? Dr.
Gabor Mate.
Gabor Mate. And he just seems like a guy who works all the time, you know what I mean? And doesn't have to answer that question ever. So I think it's a fun question to have on the show.
Totally. If I can add to that though, I think one thing I really appreciate about Tim Ferriss is that he's been really outspoken about mental health stuff. So I was like, I've heard some podcast interviews with him, and I was like, wow, thank you for, my response was, thanks for speaking up on some really difficult topics. I might be able to, I'll try to dig up the name of that episode.
Great, absolutely. The next question is, if you weren't doing what you do now, what would you be doing?
It's interesting because I actually think that I would be a therapist, like that I would get the master's in counseling, psychology, or one of those areas and do that. And it's not because I think it's easy. It's just because I think it makes a huge difference. Like the therapist that I work with, an amazing difference in my life, and it's something that I have seen for others, just like the amount of impact it makes to have that kind of mental health support. So I would definitely like to, in my second life, that's where I would have gone.
Yeah, I like to bring it back to the mental health kind of with these topics, because as you and I have kind of connected so recently, I've seen this kind of magical support network that you have with all different kinds of people who know about you, because you're very outspoken about all of your personal life, essentially, in a lot of ways, and still people are there, and they're very happy to be there, right?
It's so amazing. I'm so fortunate, and I also love letting the people in my life know that I'm there for them too. Something I'm sort of joking about is like the 2 a.m. kerning club, but it's like, it's not really because you want someone to check the kerning and the logo you're working on at the last minute. It's because you just want to know that you're not the only one sitting there. Leverage people in other time zones. If you've got some friends, it's great that we can contact people without long distance charges now. But it's so hard to speak up and say what you need, but I think it's hugely rewarding and supportive. So thank you. Shout out to my support networks.
The next question, I imagine the obvious response is something about ethics, but what would you not want to do with your career?
What would I not want to do with my career? So I'm repeating that because I'm trying to think of this. Yeah, so in the original one I talked about not wanting to be stuck in an office. So I actually don't think I want a boss ever again. I can have the mini bosses, which are, clients, creative directors, marketing directors, and they're sort of like a fractional boss. But, and I can have mentors and people I look up to and people I report to. But I got to a certain point work-wise, and I'm hoping I'm not the only one here, whereas I'm fine to be told what to do and say what formats and deliverables and a general process, but I don't want to be told how to do it anymore.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Recently Flora and I have been chatting about what it's like to be a design professional, or to, we both have that as a facet of what we do. And there's kind of this ethical element to that that we have to kind of confront a lot of the time. We'll probably get into that in more episodes, but I think it's a great one. So the next question is, what's your favorite word, quote, or sentence?
I didn't prepare this one, I'm going to be really honest.
Yeah.
So, I definitely think that it's not a specific quote, but I'm really focused on gratitude, and I know that a lot of people say that. But the more time you spend focusing on sort of positive feelings and what, if I actually sit down during the day and write down, if I'm flustered and I just sit down and take time to do gratitude, while that's not a quote, it's just something that I remind myself to feel right. Hey, look, I had breakfast, I had a safe ride on the bus. These small things really help calm me down. So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Brene Brown is such a big kind of inspiration for this podcast in a way, and for this podcasting journey and academic journey I'm on. So I can definitely relate to the talk about gratitude.
Yeah.
Do you have a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
I'm really trying to steer away from language that isn't inclusive. I'm trying to learn a lot more person-centered language and things like that. So it's almost like when I find out I'm not supposed to say something, other than swearing, I do like to swear, as long as it's not really. A lot of swear words are actually traced back to actually insulting women, so you kind of have to to dig deeper. But yeah, once I find out a term, like I don't want to say one of these terms, it's not inclusive, but once I find out that, it's kind of like I'm allergic to the word. And also just being open to the feedback that I've said something, hey, I said something, I could have said it better. That's a huge part of the process.
Great, and you mentioned gratitude, but if you had to choose one word to describe yourself, what word would you choose?
I would say evolving. I think there's a lot of things that I've started doing in the last, say, 10 years ago that I never did, and I think it's interesting to watch people react to that change. For instance, I didn't drive for over 10 years at all, and I started again now with my epilepsy and some other health problems. I'm very selective if and when I'm going to do it, but I think also coming out about my mental health challenges, I also think about the word brave. And I'm not trying to sit around and praise myself, but I've taken some big leaps, and when I've worked at agencies, I've been referred to as like the fearless one, because I will talk back, I will speak up. I don't consider myself what I used to call a graphic design yes person. Like if someone comes to me with a brief that makes no sense, I'm gonna speak up about it. Now they can say, that's fine, we don't care. We're probably able to proceed as long as it's ethical, but I don't just want to go along with something that's not going to work, not going to serve people. It's going to end up in the garbage, or worse. What do we call it? Deadly typography or something? Life or death?
Life or death typography.
That's it. Yeah.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I also don't drive. I take the transit in Vancouver. If you ever see me on the train, come say hi.
Yeah.
I'm very approachable in that way.
Totally.
Okay, yeah. So the next question is, what keeps you up at night?
Okay. Yeah, I had a really hard time during COVID, not obsessing, sorry, not that it's still not happening, but at the beginning when they were announcing how many cases and stuff, I had a really hard time not getting into obsessive thinking. So I definitely think about things obsessively, and then I have a really hard time calming down. So I've had to do what some people brilliantly refer to as microdosing the news. And it's like I need to stay on top of what's happening. I need to have enough information, but I cannot dwell on it. And then I know that there's certain really triggering topics for me, like car accidents, vehicle accidents, or anything to do with needles and things like that. So I am, as a self-care thing, I have to really choose what I'm taking in. There's certain kinds of movies, books and things like that thematically upset me. So I sort of have to learn to, almost the way that some people don't watch a horror movie on alone super late at night. It's sort of like that.
Nice. Yeah. Many of our guests caution us about social media. I use it a lot just to promote the podcast, but I mean in terms of scrolling, doom scrolling, the kind of effects that can have are something that many of our guests talk about. So yeah, definitely worth noting.
And the whole comparison trap, where you can spend all this time saying, oh, so-and-so's the same age as me, they're so much more successful. It's so easy to compare yourself, and it doesn't get you anywhere. If it gives you a little motivation, say, oh yeah, I should update my website. That's fine. But if you're sitting there beating yourself up, it's just not a healthy direction. You have to give yourself a separation. Use those tools where you can I was just about to say a term that I think isn't inclusive, so I'm recalibrating here, where you can remove notifications from someone temporarily and stay their friend. Because you still want to stay in touch, but maybe you need to take a little breather and not compare how their life or their home or their career seems so perfect on social media.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I get so worried that my podcast recording space is not good enough, and I have to buy this item or this item to make it a bit better, and I'm always trying to improve it. Maybe it's not the same thing, but feel like it's similar.
Well, for anyone not here, this is a wicked podcast recording space. It's got great sunlight if you're just listening to the audio. Really fantastic area of town with heritage buildings. So I think you're doing amazing.
Thank you so much. Okay, so final stretch here. What's a dream you're chasing?
I am chasing creating a mental health foundation that would help pay for supplementary self-care kind of services for, say, students or young designers, or like emerging designers, let's say, because I really believe in the power of, you know, getting, I think sometimes they call it paramedical. Like, so when you're going beyond the doctor's appointments, as Canadians, our system is that most of our healthcare is paid for in general, like through our taxes, and I'll say in general. Sometimes you have a longer waiting period, but I'm privileged that it's like we don't get a doctor's bill, that's kind of rolled in. But when it comes to going outside that, like if you need a naturopath or a massage therapist, like a registered massage therapist or licensed massage therapist, as they say in some parts of the US, if you need extensive counseling or therapy or things like that, it's just not covered, and it can really add up because those professionals need to be properly compensated, properly trained. So I would love to create kind of an evergreen source of funding just to help reduce the financial burden of some of those services.
Fantastic. Number 18, what inspires you?
I'm just inspired all the time by, I love things like puzzles that have multiple answers and things like that. I just love to like my dad would save us these like logic problems and logic puzzles, and like ones that are even like from around the world, like games and things like that, things like in other languages. I just love that kind of thing because I often talk about this hamster that runs on a wheel in my head, and I'm always just trying to find like what is the latest. Like I even met this guy who makes crypto crosswords. The crypto crosswords are so hard, but I'm just like super motivated and inspired. Like, what is the process to come up with these kind of puzzles, and how many different answers? What are other people gonna say for their answers?
Absolutely. So, any advice you'd like to share?
Yeah, I feel like I've shared a few tips for those emerging in the field. I'd like to share another tip for people at their first jobs out of school, is to first try to make a lot of mistakes in school, because this is when you're not paying for print jobs, for big print jobs. Like do that experimentation before it's on someone's dime, and then you've got to figure out how to do it on someone's time as well. But when you're at your first job, you know, raise your hand, put your hand up. My first internship in publishing, and I found out one of my colleagues was going to be away, and I booked a meeting with my supervisor, and I said, hey, which tasks that belong to this person, are there some of them that I can do while this person's away? Like, can I color correct pictures, or what can I do to have their role, to be a bit of a zombie and a bit of a vampire and sap their skills and energy? What opportunities are there? Because later on, it's so much easier to start picking up these skills on the way than to have a project coming to you. And one more tip that I have is if you want to learn a software program, it's really, really, really hard to do it when you have an assignment due in 2 days. I know that at Emily Carr, when we were working in a design program, we definitely learned software in a week, and that's fine. But I mean, if you're also trying to take care of yourself, so if you're a sort of aspiring designer, make a family recipe book or a family newsletter or something for your church or something for your sports team, or like a little holiday card. Try learning Canva, try learning InDesign. try these software programs when you don't have a huge deadline, and actually print out a copy of things that are going to get printed. Test them. That's my tip.
Absolutely valuable. And number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you? How are we following you this time?
Yeah, so reach out to me on LinkedIn, but also you can find me under my name, Flora Gordon, on Instagram, which will lead you to Image. I like to share pictures of what I'm up to, and then I have this other project called #Dogs of Save-On Foods, where I have spent many years photographing dogs waiting outside the grocery store. So if you love dogs and if they would cheer you up, even for a second or two, check out that hashtag on Instagram, and you'll see many cute dogs of East Van.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on more than an audio podcast today. To hear you expand on your ideas around mental health, to broaden that conversation, but then also to talk about the kind of day-to-day of being a designer, I think is a really kind of inspiring combination for a lot of our viewers who are probably in that exact situation. Please, guys, check out this book, The Miracle Mindset, co-authored by Flora Gordon. It's a really inspiring book, and you should check it out. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks so much, Thomas. Love what you put together here, and appreciate being the first video guest.
Great, thanks.
Thanks.